Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that your entire species is slowly disappearing, not because of a disease, not because of a war, but because the world around you is changing in ways you cannot understand. Around 13,000 years ago, this was the reality for the dire wolf. Unlike the wolves we know today, dire wolves were larger, heavier, and built to hunt some of the biggest animals of the Ice Age. For thousands of years, they dominated North America and lived at the very top of the food chain. Vast grasslands stretched across the continent. Giant bison roamed freely, ancient horses raced through open plains, and enormous ground sloths wandered through forests. This was the world of the dire wolf, a world where strength meant survival, and survival seemed guaranteed. Hunting was not simply a skill, it was a way of life. Dire wolves likely hunted in packs, working together to track and bring down prey much larger than themselves. Their powerful jaws and muscular bodies made them some of the most effective predators of their time. Generation after generation grew up in a world that appeared stable and endless, where food was available and their position at the top seemed unchallenged. If you had stood in the wilderness during that era and heard the distant howl of a dire wolf pack, you would have been listening to one of the most successful predators nature had ever created. However, nature has a rule that many powerful species fail to understand. Strength alone is never enough. A species must also be able to adapt. As the Ice Age slowly came to an end, the world began to change. Temperatures started rising, glaciers retreated, and entire ecosystems transformed. What seemed like small environmental shifts gradually became major changes that affected every living creature. The giant animals that dire wolves relied upon for survival began disappearing. Some migrated into new territories while others struggled to survive in the changing climate. Several species vanished completely. For a predator that had evolved specifically to hunt large prey, this created a serious problem. The very animals that had supported the dire wolf population for thousands of years were becoming increasingly rare. Each year, food became harder to find, hunting became more difficult, and competition for survival became more intense. The dire wolf had not become weaker, but the world it was designed for was slowly disappearing. And for the first time in its long history, one of North America's greatest predators was facing a challenge that could not be defeated with strength, speed, or powerful jaws. The real enemy was change itself. As the environment continued to change, the challenges facing dire wolves became even greater. Food was already becoming scarce, but another problem was beginning to emerge. A new competitor was spreading across North America, one unlike anything dire wolves had encountered before: humans. At first, humans may not have seemed like a serious threat. They were smaller, slower, and physically weaker than many predators, yet they possessed something far more powerful than claws or teeth: intelligence. Humans worked together, communicated, created tools, and developed hunting strategies that allowed them to take down animals much larger than themselves. Many of the same animals hunted by dire wolves were now also being hunted by humans. As human populations expanded, the pressure on these prey species increased. Every animal killed by humans meant one less opportunity for a dire wolf pack to feed. At the same time, dire wolves faced competition from another predator that still exists today: the gray wolf. While dire wolves were larger and stronger, gray wolves possessed an advantage that would prove far more valuable in a changing world. They were adaptable. Gray wolves could survive on a wider variety of food sources and adjust their behavior when conditions changed. Dire wolves, on the other hand, were highly specialized hunters that depended heavily on large prey animals. What had once been their greatest strength was now becoming their greatest weakness. As the populations of large Ice Age animals declined, gray wolves were able to adapt. Dire wolves struggled. Over many generations, the effects became impossible to ignore. Packs became smaller. Territories that had once supported large populations grew empty. The howls that once echoed across North America became less frequent with every passing century. The decline was slow enough that no single dire wolf could have noticed it happening, yet fast enough to push the species toward extinction. Each generation inherited a world that was slightly harsher than the one before. Less food, more competition, fewer opportunities to survive. Eventually, the population fell to a point where recovery was no longer possible. One by one, The remaining packs disappeared. The mighty predator that had dominated an entire continent for thousands of years was reaching the end of its journey. Then, one day, the last dire wolf died. There was no audience to witness it. No dramatic final battle. No moment in history books marking the event. With that single death, an entire species vanished forever. Today, all that remains are fossils buried beneath the ground, silent evidence of a predator that once ruled an ancient world. The story of the dire wolf teaches us something fascinating about nature. Survival does not always belong to the strongest, the largest, or even the most feared. More often, survival belongs to those that can adapt when the world changes around them. The dire wolf was one of the greatest predators of the Ice Age, but even greatness cannot survive forever if it cannot change with time.